My Dress Up Darling may exude a very specific energy among anime fans,
水着着てきたし。
but intertwined with that energy is a series that has an incredibly welcoming cast of characters. Every character is celebrated regardless of their situation or how or what they choose to cosplay. No one is ever made fun of or deprecated, but instead, they're all uplifted. And Marin Kitagawa is a perfect encapsulation of this concept. Anything and everything she comes into contact with, she adores with an infectious passion. It's impressive how much she exudes love for so many different things, but it roots the series in its uplifting characters. Every cosplay she sees, she's gushing over it like it is the greatest thing ever conceived. It makes me want to be able to see the in-universe series to understand what all the hype's about. But Marin's passion is also what holds the series together and brings it from place to place. So many people are grabbed into her sphere purely by her love of their cosplay. And this brings us to the crystallization of how uplifting and positive the atmosphere of My Dress Up Darling is. I'm going to be into manga spoilers now, just in case. The rest of this video will be dealing with content from after the anime adaptation, albeit not by much, but this is your warning. Stop here if you don't want to be spoiled. I recommend reading it, it's very good. Just after the anime adaptation ends, we're introduced to a new character in the series, Himeno, who is cosplaying yet another girl that Marin is just hopelessly in love with. Nothing is new here except for one crucial detail. Himeno is actually a man. I imagine the natural reaction to this is one of much more confusion and maybe disdain, but this is My Dress Up Darling, so that is not the case. Marin and Gojo are surprised, but then are immediately just back to being themselves. Gojo pivots to his curiosity with the craft of the cosplay, and then Marin just feeds into that while bringing her own energy to it. And when other cosplayers come in, they're unfazed by this revelation that Himeno's a man. If anything, they're more into it because he's a man. Himeno is understandably a bit hesitant about how people would receive this information, but thankfully, he's been placed in a series that welcomes him with open arms. We learn that Himeno's love of cosplay came from never being manly enough for the people around him. Cosplaying as women allowed him to grow to feel comfortable with himself while also expressing himself how he wanted to. His hesitation of revealing that information stemmed from his ex-girlfriend throwing away all his cosplay outfits once she discovered he was cosplaying as a girl. And in comes Marin with a waterfall of tears at how cruel Himeno's ex was. And it's such a perfect response to dispel any concern Himeno could have had. Marin is just immediately overwhelmed by sadness that someone could be so cruel in that way. Because she believes anyone should be allowed to cosplay as long as they love the character. And My Dress Up Darling agrees and takes every opportunity to celebrate cosplay of every kind. The series puts a lot of emphasis on every aspect of cosplay, both the physical craft as well as the emotions behind choosing a specific character. Himeno's introduction to the story also serves as the arc that really introduces pre-made cosplays. We're still treated to Gojo creating these masterful cosplays, but characters like Himeno and in future arcs make a point to note how accessible cosplay can be for someone. And I think this is very important to note because cosplay is meant to be for anyone and everyone. As long as you love the character enough, you can cosplay them. Future arcs in the manga hammer this act down much more by showing more nuanced ways to show a cosplay, even if you don't match the proportions or various other ways that you think you might not be able to. The focus of the series is on loving and trying to put as much of your soul into the character that you want to cosplay, where they see cosplay as an act of love for a character that doesn't include gender in that. It might be easier to cosplay as your preferred gender, but that shouldn't be a stopping point if you love the character enough. My Dress Up Darling has put in more than enough legwork to hammer that point down. But ultimately that fact is also just true of any art form. What I love about My Dress Up Darling beyond all that I've already said is that it's a series focused on self-expression, but also on the craft of making art. Behind every cosplay, even the pre-made ones, is an artist, and the series spends ample time showing how the cosplays are made. There is no My Dress Up Darling without Gojo learning the ins and outs of how to make a cosplay. And throughout the course of the series, we see him push himself to improve time and time again. The process of making an intricate cosplay like he does, or really any art in general, is that struggle between your vision of reaching that perfection and then your skill at actually doing that. Eventually, you can get there, but the two might not always align. Gojo is starting off with many hours logged into the act of creation, but that isn't a barrier to create or for creation at all. It offers you the route of really getting into the artistry, but the cosplay is still allowing for you to just get a pre-made one and really show your love for a character that way. Both of these forms of cosplay and levels of detail, they both stem from a love of a character, but one involves more time and effort, which some people just don't have. You can express yourself simply by just being that character and pouring every ounce of your being into them, or you can pour it into the craft of making every little detail as perfect as possible. Neither one is inherently better than the other. And to some extent, this is kind of why those Bob Ross painting sets exist, where it's people want to paint and they want to express themselves through art, but sometimes you just want an easy little painting thing instead of needing to spend 80 hours on a piece. And that's fine. And ultimately, the simpler forms of creating cosplay, like pre-made and all that fun stuff, can feed into wanting to put more effort into cosplay. But even behind that, it's all a matter of someone expressing themselves. Himeno's backstory is all about finding yourself through cosplay and how you express yourself. By donning the mask of another character, he can find himself and learn to love himself. It's kind of a lot like being a VTuber, but more physically involved, which is kind of what has always intrigued me about VTubers, is that you have this cover of a character. It's kind of a costume in a way that you can allow you to channel what you want to be into. You're portraying a character so you can bend and shape yourself into the person you want to be, and then eventually the two can merge together to make the best person possible. Because cosplay and VTubing can be a simple act of wearing a costume to express yourself, but it can also be much more meaningful in your growth as a human being. And as we find out by the end of Himeno's introduction, he's much more comfortable with himself now that he's cosplaying more and is enjoying it. It allowed him to grow to love himself through, it may not be some grand journey, but as long as you're growing as a human being, the route doesn't really matter. We all find meaning in our lives in different ways. Gojo finds it through creating Hina dolls and creating cosplay, and Hino finds it by cosplaying anime girls. Both are just as valid. And I respect mangaka Shinichi Fukuda for celebrating both. Both of these could easily be manga on their own, but instead they fit nicely into the narrative journey of My Dress-Up Darling, a series that I love a lot, and has honestly made me want to try cosplaying at conventions and stuff. There aren't many that fit my physical appearance, in my own opinion. You're welcome to disagree, but I have plenty of characters I love enough that I could overcome that hurdle with. So maybe one day you'll see me in cosplay, and you can know that it's thanks to the expert efforts of My Dress-Up Darling for getting me into it and convincing me that anyone can cosplay.